Basically, I was born Jewish to a Jewish family, and I converted to Islam in 2018. So I get asked a lot of how I converted to Islam, of course, as most reverts get this question. So in this video, I'll get into it. So, as I mentioned, I was born to a Jewish family. I was born in Montreal, Canada, to actually a Hasidic family. So, up until I was 3 or 4 years old, up until my parents' divorce, I was raised Hasidic. And afterwards, once my parents got divorced, my mother took me and my siblings out of the Hasidic community, but we still remained Jewish, of course, and we still remained in the Jewish community. I went to a Jewish school my whole life, obviously up until the end of high school. So at that point, I was super Jewish, believed in God. I always believed in God, but I believed in Judaism specifically. I believed in the Torah. I believed in the teachings of Judaism because I had a Jewish education and I held really closely to that. Since I went to a Jewish school, I was also actually a staunch Zionist. I was super pro-Israel. And yeah, I held really closely to my religion and to, I guess, what I thought was my nationality, being Israeli. So yeah, it was only until I graduated high school, once I left, the Jewish community, that I started meeting, non-Jewish people. And it all started basically when people would start asking me questions about Judaism, and I would answer them, and sometimes I'd be met with challenges. They would challenge me, but this. For example, I had a woman ask me about Shabbat, and I explained to her because the Torah says that we must cease work on the seventh day because God created the world in 6 days, and the seventh day He rested. And she was like, yeah, but how come you can't use your phone? You can't do this, you can't do that. There are a lot of rules. And, it started putting a lot of doubt in me. And I remember that question specifically from that woman. I still remember who asked me that. Her name was Mary, and I worked with her at a grocery store. So it kind of started like that. And, I started having, a bit of doubt in my heart about, what I was practicing. So before going to school every day on the bus, I took a little Tehillim, which is a book of Psalms, which was written by the King David. And I started reading that, and I was like, you know what, hopefully that's going to, ignite my, my passion, my, in Arabic we say my iman, my faith. So I started reading that, and it was really nice. It was a nice book. And I remember one thing in particular that I remember that kept reoccurring was how King David mentioned that he was prostrating in prayer to God. We prostrate in prayer to you, God. And it was mentioned over and over again. And that got me curious. So I was like, why don't Jews prostrate during prayer? So I Googled it. I went to Chabad.org, blah, blah, blah. I did a lot of research, spoke to rabbis, but it still did not satisfy me. All the responses I was getting were not satisfactory to me. And it was at that point that I realized that Judaism, standard modern Judaism that people practice today, is called Rabbinic Judaism because it is inspired, not inspired, but a lot of the rules and a lot of the holidays and the regulations that Jews practice today are from rabbis, from rabbinical interpretations, sages basically from the past. And it was at that point that I was like, that's strange. But it also explained my questions, why did we do this on Passover? Why did we do this on Hanukkah? Why did we do this on Rosh Hashanah? And it answered a lot of my questions. I was like, it makes sense because they're following the interpretations of rabbis and they're not following, strictly, they're following the word of the Torah, but these specifications, even the Shabbat, restrictions don't come specifically, all of them, from Torah. At that same time, I didn't really have any Muslim friends. I had one Muslim friend, but she wasn't, we never spoke about religion. But I knew some Muslim people online that I would sometimes speak to. And one time I had a whole conversation with it wasn't a friend, it was a Muslim online friend that I never met. Actually, I never really met in real life. But anyways, we had a discussion and we were sending each other videos about religion, and I saw this one video about debates between Muslims and Jews, and I started realizing at that point that Islam and Judaism are so similar. It was also at that point that I realized that Jews and Muslims believe in the same God, and also Christians, but that's not really relevant to this story. But up till now, to this point, I basically thought that, Muslims worshipped a different God. They worshipped Allah, which is a different God. I realized that Allah is actually just the name for God in Arabic, just like, Dieu is Arabic and French. So I was like, okay, they believe in the Torah, they believe in the Gospels, they believe in all of the Jewish prophets that, Jews believe in. And the only thing that they believe in more is the Prophet Jesus and the Prophet Muhammad as the seal of the prophets, and the Quran as the word of God. So basically that's the only addition that it has to over Judaism. And I also, while I was Jewish, was like, oh yeah, Muslims stole our texts, they're just reusing, they're like copying our texts. That's really what I believed. And I realized that it wasn't copying Jewish texts, it was literally the same God. So God was continuing his message, it's the same message, and it just has, I guess, some new information, some new tweaks. And I explained it to myself as it's like an update. People don't like when I use that term, but in my head I was like, it's like an update to Judaism. So at that point I was like, okay, it's not a whole different thing. And I decided to actually start looking to Islam. And also when I was thinking about, when I was reading the Tehillim, and I realized that, he was saying, well, we prostrate in prayer to God, I did actually think of Muslims. So I was like, okay, that makes sense why Muslims pray to God. Pray to God, in the way they do with prostration, because that's what God wanted. That's what God says. And that's how Jews were praying up until a certain point, until the rabbis came along and said, we don't pray this way anymore. And I also remember, how Muslims pray without their shoes on, and I was like, that makes sense, because a mosque is a holy ground. When you pray when you speak to God, you're speaking to someone so holy, so you have to respect them and take off your shoes. And I thought of, the time when Moses spoke to God and in the burning fire, the Snebo el Ba'esh, I'm not sure exactly what it's called in English, but it's like the fire, and God said, please take off your shoes to speak to me and to address me. And this was holy ground, so he had to take off his shoes. And I was like, that makes sense. And it was little things like this. At this point, I still was not actually considering being Muslim, but it was little things like that that kept being added into I kept realizing that I was like, okay, Islam makes sense. This makes sense. Until one point, I was like, you know what? I'll read the Quran, and I started reading the Quran, and the Quran made sense. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfect. But at that point, I still wasn't fully, convinced I'm going to change my religion, because I felt the thing that was holding me back most was honestly, I felt like I'd be abandoning all of my cultures, all of my traditions, everything that I once believed in would be completely gone, just because, I'm changing my religion, and my religion was a fundamental part of me, of who I was. And I had a really hard time, drifting, separating myself from that, and, accepting Islam. But at some point I realized that actually accepting Islam and being Muslim and practicing Islam would actually make me a better Jew. And I wasn't separating myself from Judaism. It was the same God. I was still being, it was still the same religion as the God of Judaism. So I came to realize that at some point. And it was just over time, like I said, many little things that I learned about Islam that made sense to me, even the modesty and, how the modesty of how Muslims dress, it made sense to me. And I'm my whole life, modesty made sense to me because I was raised Jewish, and it just all made sense to me. And I can't exactly remember what was the last drop that made me Muslim, but I do remember when I decided basically to become Muslim. It was Ramadan, it was 2017, and I was like, I'm gonna do Ramadan just want to see what it's like, so I was like, I'll do it. And as a Jew, I had fasted for Yom Kippur, so it was 25 hours for Yom Kippur, so I'm like, yeah, I can do this. And I was able to do this, and I was like, what, I want to fully immerse myself in it, so I'm gonna pray too. So subhanallah, I actually learned to pray really quickly. And I remember that I think it's in the Quran, or it says that God made this language easy for you to understand. And I was like, subhanallah, I was able to learn to pray so quick, and I never had even spoken Arabic. All I knew was like shukran and salam, like honestly. So I started praying, and I remember one time I was in bed, I was like, okay, how do you become Muslim? And it said, you just need to repeat this word. It was the shahada, the sentence. So I sat in my bed, I was like, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. And I said it, and I'm like, am I Muslim now? Like, I feel the same. So technically, I was Muslim since 2017, but I still at that point wasn't like fully immersed in Islam. Like, my heart wasn't fully there, so I don't necessarily consider myself fully Muslim at that point. And I still had some things to work on, abstain from certain things that Muslim must abstain from. But yeah, I was still starting to think about Islam. I went to some Jum'ah prayers, and then it wasn't until later, it was in January, I met this girl online. And actually it was funny, I was like posting a lot of stuff about Israel, like a lot of pro-Israel stuff, and she was sent over by one of her other friends who sent her over to talk to me and be like, why are you supporting this, that? And anyways, we started talking, and then I told her, we started hanging out too. And then at one point, I told her, I'm like, you know what, I want to just convert to Islam. I want to do it. I want to fully do it. So it was in January 26, 2018 that I actually converted to Islam. I took my shahada, and that's when I consider myself fully Muslim. The question is, how did my family react when I had told them that I had converted to Islam? So basically, after I had converted to Islam, I hadn't really told anybody for a long time. It took me an especially long time to tell my family. So it was about a year and a half after converting to Islam that I decided that I had to tell my mom about my decision. So basically, one evening, I was in the summer. I took her out to eat dinner, and I had just told her straight up that I had converted to Islam and I was Muslim. So basically, she had made it very clear that she was not happy with my decision. She wasn't angry at me or mad at me, but she was mostly sad and disappointed, so that hurt a lot, and it made it harder for me personally. She told me that she felt that she had failed me as a parent, and that she had failed me in the religion, and she felt that she should have done something different. She wishes she had done something different, but I made it clear to her that it was nothing she had done, and it was simply part of my journey and part of my life, basically, and this is what felt right to me. Still today, she doesn't really accept it. She just lives with it, basically. That's how I describe it. She still supports me, and I still live at her house currently. So we still have a good relationship, although we do disagree on quite a few things in terms of religion and politics, and so we just don't talk about these things. With my family, I don't talk about to them about politics at all, because I disagree with all of them, and it's just like a pointless argument. So I never told anyone else in my family. I believe that my siblings, so my sisters and my brother, know through my mom, but I had never formally told them that I had accepted Islam. They just kind of know, and we had never talked about it either, so I'm not sure what their reactions are exactly. We've never discussed it, but I imagine that they're thinking that it's weird or strange, or they have bad, thoughts about it. But yeah, nobody else in my family knows. I had not told my grandparents or anybody else, my cousins or aunts or uncle or cousins. I think I already said cousins. But yeah, I had never told anyone else in my family. So far it's just my mother and my siblings who know. And I am not yet brave enough to tell my grandparents. My mother is strongly discouraging me from doing so, which is really unfortunate because I am married and basically they don't know. And I want to have kids soon, and if I do have a kid soon, inshallah, my grandparents are going to have to know, and I'd rather them find out, before I have a kid that I am Muslim and married. But my mother is really not interested in that. She's telling me that I should not do that because I'm going to give my grandparents a heart attack. So far, I'm still kind of living a double life. But I'm starting to care less and less what people know about me. I'm mostly hiding my identity. Hiding my me being Muslim for my mom, because I don't want to hurt her and I don't want, you know, people to come talking to her badly about me and giving her problems. But yeah, basically that's the answer to your question. My family didn't really react positively, but not all of them know. So thank you so much for watching, and if you have any more questions, you can ask them in the comments, and inshallah I will answer them as best as possible. Thank you.